In July 2026, a strong earthquake hit Kumamoto in southern Japan. It was a magnitude 7.1 earthquake. This was one of the biggest earthquakes there in 10 years. It made a shopping mall fall down, and many people were caught inside the rubble. 38 people died, and many more were hurt. For a country that often has small earthquakes, this one was unusually deadly. But this terrible event was, strangely, not even the main news in Japan that week. The physical shaking of the ground was a clear sign of many bigger, unseen problems shaking the country. People asked, why was this deadly natural disaster not the biggest news? Japan was facing 4 huge challenges all at the same time. First, its money, the Japanese yen, was losing value very fast. This was called a currency freefall, reaching its lowest value against the US dollar in about 40 years. Second, the number of people in Japan was getting smaller. The population had dropped below 120 million for the first time in over 4 decades, meaning fewer workers and less growth. Third, there were big problems in the government. Japan had its first female prime minister, who had been in office for only 9 months. She was dealing with much political turmoil, managing a difficult economy and changes in society. Fourth, there were dangers from other countries.
These geopolitical threats included rising tensions with China and a war far away that made important oil prices rise sharply. Any one of these problems alone would be very serious for most countries, but for Japan, the world's 4th largest economy, all these severe pressures hit from every possible side at exactly the same moment. This situation makes people wonder, can Japan survive this summer without falling apart? Or is this the true beginning of a major national collapse? 2. The money problem. Japan faced a big question. How did its currency, once very strong, suddenly become so weak? In July 2026, the Japanese yen dropped quickly. It went past 163 yen to 1 US dollar. This was its lowest point in about 40 years, a shock for everyone. Many wondered why this was happening in one of the world's largest economies. One main reason was a difference in interest rates. The United States had much higher rates than Japan. This made it more appealing for investors to keep their money in US dollars. Because of this, the yen became less attractive, causing its value to fall against many other monies, not just the dollar. Adding to the problem were new government plans, called Sunonomics. These were controversial policies that included big tax cuts and a large financial stimulus package. For example, the government planned to stop the 8% sales tax on food for 2 years. This, along with other spending, meant the government would spend much more money than it collected in taxes. This pushed Japan's budget deficit much higher. Investors became worried about Japan's ability to manage its money, which led them to sell off Japanese government bonds. This caused chaos in the bond market. Prices for long-term bonds changed wildly, something not seen in many years. The Bank of Japan found itself in a difficult situation. It holds almost half of all government bonds. If it raised interest rates to make the yen stronger and fight rising prices, it would make the government's huge debt much more expensive to pay back. This could hurt the government badly. But if the Bank of Japan kept rates low to protect the government's budget, the yen would keep losing value and prices would continue to rise quickly. There was no easy choice.
The government tried to intervene in the currency market, spending billions of dollars to buy yen and stop its fall. Between late April and late May, Japan spent over 70 billion US dollars. However, despite these huge efforts, the yen continued to slide to new lows. This left a frightening question. What would happen when the government no longer had enough money to keep trying? 3. Too expensive to eat. For many people in Japan, the money problems were not just numbers, they were felt every day, especially at dinner. Tomoko Ida, a 48-year-old graphic designer and mother of two in Tokyo, saw this clearly. A 5-kilogram bag of rice, which used to cost around 3,000 yen, now cost 4,000 to 5,000 yen. Rice was a daily staple for her family. Because of the higher prices, they had to eat pasta and noodles several times a week instead of the rice that had always been a daily staple. This rise in price was not just for rice. Late in 2025, rice prices jumped by 90.7% in 1 year. Chocolate prices went up by over 50%. These rising food costs became a big problem across Japan for 2 years. The rice problem started with a very hot summer in 2023. This hot weather made less rice grow and lowered its quality. This shortage was then made worse by a surge in tourist demand for Japanese rice and rice-based products. At the same time, people's wages were going up. In 2026, workers saw their pay increase by 5.26% during the spring negotiations, called shunto. This was the third year in a row that wages rose by more than 5%, a rate not seen in 3 decades. However, many workers felt poorer, not richer. This is because inflation was eating away at their paychecks. Real wages, which means how much people can actually buy after prices go up, fell for the 4th year. About 4% of the pay raise was taken by inflation, rising social insurance payments, and a newly introduced child support tax. So, the actual net gain for workers was only about 1.3%. This created a truly strange economic moment. The largest wage increases in more than 3 decades, yet workers still felt, and statistically were, no better off. In November 2025, inflation-adjusted wages fell by 2.8%. This marked the 11th straight month of decline in real pay, showing a continuous drop in people's buying power. The weak yen made imported goods like food and energy more expensive. Extreme weather also hurt crops, leading to higher prices. There were some small signs of hope. In January 2026, real wages turned positive for the first time in 13 months, rising 1.4% from the year before. By February, annual inflation had eased to 1.3%. This was helped by government subsidies on electricity and gas, and rice prices not increasing as fast. But it is not clear if this relief will last. Experts warn that if the yen continues to lose value, prices for imported energy and food could rise again, erasing any small gains for families. This situation is hitting small businesses very hard. Nearly half of Japan's small and medium-sized businesses say a proposed 1,500 yen minimum wage is simply impossible for them to sustain. Many are already facing big problems. The number of bankruptcies caused by labor costs jumped by more than 77% in the last year. These low-wage, labor-intensive small businesses are the backbone of much of Japan's retail and service economy. They are caught between paying more to workers
and having customers who cannot afford higher prices. Japan's everyday service economy is now teetering on the edge of a cliff, with thousands of businesses possibly closing soon. 4. Where are the people? Japan faces a serious and continuous problem. Its population is getting smaller every year. As of early 2026, the country's population officially dropped below 120 million. This is the lowest number recorded in 4 decades. It also marks the 17th year in a row that the population has declined since it reached its peak in 2009. Japan now has one of the oldest populations in the world, with the average age of its citizens being almost 50 years old. This shrinking is a slow, irreversible change that fills many with a sense of worry. The numbers show how serious the situation is. In 2025, about 1.6 million people died in Japan. However, only around 700,000 babies were born. This means the country lost almost 900,000 people in just 1 year. This loss is like a mid-sized city disappearing from the map every 12 months. Experts had not expected this fast rate of decline until many years later.
If this trajectory continues, Japan's total population could fall sharply, reaching only 63 million by the year 2100. Many small rural villages across Japan are already empty, and some are quietly disappearing off the map completely. These communities risk losing their local crafts, traditions, and even their existence. The government is trying hard to find solutions to this problem. Prime Minister Takaichi has called the population decline the country's biggest challenge. She created a new group, the Population Strategy Headquarters, to tackle it. Their efforts include subsidized childcare and financial help for families where both parents work. They even launched a special dating app that uses AI to help people find partners. This unconventional approach has helped 265 couples get married so far. While this is a positive step, it is a very small number compared to the huge deficit in births that the country is experiencing. Japan clearly needs more foreign workers to support its aging and shrinking workforce and to keep its lights on. The number of foreign people living in Japan has reached a new high of over 3.7 million. However, there is a strong and growing feeling against foreigners in the country's politics. This rising anti-foreigner sentiment makes it difficult for the government to welcome more immigrants, even when the economy desperately needs them. For example, a program for exchange with African nations was stopped in 2025 because of angry protests and false information spread on social media about a flood of immigrants. This sets the stage for a dangerous cultural clash. This situation creates a big challenge for Japan. The economy needs more workers, but many people are worried about demographic and cultural changes. The political leaders have chosen to focus on these worries rather than solving the contradiction. This means that while the country is slowly disappearing with empty rural areas and disappearing traditions, it also faces increasing anger towards the very people who could help it survive. The future of a nation with fewer people and growing social divisions looks very uncertain. 5. When the earth shakes. The ground in Japan is often unstable. On July 28, 2026, a strong earthquake hit Kumamoto. It was magnitude 7.1.
This quake caused a shopping mall to break partly, and people had to leave the area quickly. About 38 people died, and many more were hurt. It was a very serious earthquake for Japan, a country used to many small tremors. But this Kumamoto earthquake was not the biggest worry. A much larger danger lies beneath Japan, the Nankai Trough. This is a big fault line under the sea along Japan's Pacific coast. Here, tectonic plates move against each other. History shows that very large earthquakes, sometimes called megaquakes, happen here every 100 to 150 years. Scientists say there is a 70 to 80% chance that a huge earthquake, a magnitude 8 or 9, will strike along the Nankai Trough in the next 30 years. This event could kill nearly 300,000 people in a bad situation. People know this danger. In August 2024, a warning about a possible megaquake caused many people to buy things in panic, clearing store shelves. After the Kumamoto quake, Prime Minister Takaichi told everyone to be ready and know their evacuation plans. The government and military are getting ready for this big event. The United States and Japan have even practiced together for a Nankai Trough earthquake and tsunami. They want to know how to help people if it happens. This shows how serious the threat is. If this big one comes, it would not just be a human tragedy. It would hit Japan's industrial heartland, where many factories and businesses are located. The country's economy is already weak from other problems. Such a huge disaster could destroy Japan's main industrial areas in a very short time, making the nation's problems much worse. The fear of this earthquake is a constant shadow over Japan. People live knowing that the ground they stand on can shake violently at any moment. This ever-present geological risk adds another layer of pressure to a nation already dealing with many challenges. If the Nankai Trough ruptures and the megaquake hits, Japan would face a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. The government's ability to help its citizens and rebuild would be pushed to its absolute limits, perhaps beyond. Trouble from far away. Japan was already facing many problems at home. Then, new trouble came from far away. In February 2026, a massive war suddenly erupts in the Middle East. The United States and Israel attacked Iran, leading to Iran fighting back. This conflict closed the Strait of Hormuz. This closure caused huge problems for global oil supplies. Japan felt this shock strongly because about 93% of its oil imports and much of its natural gas pass through this strait. Also, nearly half of Japan's food depends on imports, including fertilizers from the same contested region. This meant a war 7,000 kilometers away threatened Japan's energy and food. Japan had large oil reserves, enough for over 250 days, and used some quickly. Still, gas prices hit record highs, and the war was expected to slow Japan's economy. 90% of Japanese people worried about the conflict's impact. At the same time, Japan faced rising military tensions with China. In November 2025, Prime Minister Takaichi said a Chinese attack on Taiwan could be a serious problem for Japan, causing a big diplomatic rupture with Beijing. China responded with export bans. This tension led Japan to build its military faster than at any time since World War II, planning to double arms spending and discussing changing laws to officially recognize its military. Japan's trade relationship with its main ally, the United States, also had problems. In July 2025, a trade deal was made. However, a U.S. court decision in February 2026 questioned President Donald Trump's earlier tariff plans. While Trump and Takaichi aimed to keep the deal, its legal future remained unclear. So, Japan found itself surrounded by external threats it could not control. A faraway war threatened its energy and food. Tensions with China led to a fast military buildup. Its trade with the U.S. was uncertain. With emergency energy reserves draining, Prime Minister Takaichi had to manage these unpredictable challenges. Japan's heavy reliance on other countries for key resources made these distant problems very real for everyone in Japan. 7. Too many visitors. Japan was facing many problems, but one part of its economy was doing very well: tourism. Many people from other countries were coming to visit. This might sound good, but it was causing new difficulties for the people who lived there. Because the Japanese yen was very weak, Japan became an inexpensive place for wealthy tourists. For example, a hotel room that cost $180 a few years ago now cost only about $130 or $140 for foreigners. Japan was like a big sale. In 2025, over 42 million international visitors came to Japan, and they spent a lot of money, almost 9.5 trillion yen. This money helped the economy, especially in parts of Japan that needed it. However, all these visitors made daily life harder for Japanese people. This problem is called over-tourism. Buses and trains were very crowded. Famous streets and photo spots were full of people, making it hard for locals to move around. Even simple things became difficult. For example, there was a shortage of popular matcha tea products because tourists bought so much. Shops had to limit purchases to one item per person. Tourist demand for rice also made it harder for Japanese families to buy their daily food. The government started to act. They did not want to stop tourists from coming, but they wanted to manage the crowds. In July 2026, they tripled the departure tax. Now tourists had to pay 3,000 yen when leaving Japan. They also planned new rules for 2028, like checking people more closely and changing how tax-free shopping works. Tourists would pay the full tax first and then get a refund later. A new idea being discussed was two-tiered pricing. This means foreign visitors would pay more than Japanese people at some tourist places. This could help protect old historical sites and also control the number of visitors. But this idea could also make some international visitors angry. It might make Japan seem unwelcoming and isolate the country from the people who were helping its economy. Even though there were many visitors, the number of new international arrivals actually went down in April 2026. This was mainly because fewer people came from China. But the problem was not just about the total number of tourists. It was about too many tourists going to the same few popular places. This situation also connected to bigger feelings in Japan. Many people were worried about the growing number of foreigners, both tourists and long-term residents. This anxiety played a part in the rise of some political groups and how the Prime Minister, Sanaya Takaichi, handled immigration. So tourism was not just a separate issue, it was part of Japan's larger problems about its people and its future. The government's plans were controversial and could make things better or worse. 8. Is it really the end? Japan in 2026 seemed to face many big problems. Yet there was another side to this story, one that showed surprising strength. Global financial organizations like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the OECD closely watched Japan.
They found an economy that was impressively strong and displayed great resilience against tough global situations. The Japanese economy was growing well, often above what was expected. Domestic demand was strong, and unemployment rates were very low. Japan also maintained a strong current account, earning a lot from its foreign investments, adding to its wealth. The country's wealth was indeed massive and deeply rooted. Japan held a record 561.75 trillion yen in assets outside its own borders at the end of 2025. This confirmed its place as one of the world's richest nations that lend money. Another key factor was that about 90% of Japan's government bonds were held domestically by its own people and banks. This protected the country from sudden loss of foreign investor trust that has caused problems for other nations with large debts. While the Japanese yen was weak, the stock market presented a very different picture. On July 31, 2026, the Nikkei 225 stock index closed at an all-time record high. This happened even as many worried about the currency's value. This situation highlights Japan's dual reality: visible problems on one side, but hidden growth and underlying strength on the other. A weaker yen also helped many Japanese companies by making their exports cheaper for foreign buyers, boosting profits. Experts who study Japan are not fully in agreement about whether 2026 truly marks a national collapse or simply another tough chapter. Japan has a long history of facing enormous challenges and finding ways to overcome them. It successfully navigated the asset price bubble burst in the 1990s and recovered from the devastating 2011 earthquake and tsunami. The Japanese people are famous for their quiet, determined strength and their ability to work together effectively. This strong social cohesion is a crucial part of their national character. Japan possesses deep institutional strength in its government and societal structures. These foundations have allowed it to absorb many shocks over time. Now it faces a weak currency, a volatile bond market, a shrinking population, growing military concerns, and threats from other nations. All these pressures are converging at the same time. Will 2026 be remembered as the year Japan finally broke under pressure, or as the painful start of a new, stronger era? What do you think the future holds for Japan?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.